Alrighty. Anybody know what we're up to?
I don't know. I have an article on 335, but I'm not sure.
Yes, I know.
335.
I'm not sure what.
We got 2 votes for 335.
Yeah, I would have said 334, so the same thing.
Okay, well that's the view.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is that?
So,
Let me see.
according to my notes, we wanted to restart from the top.
Wow, look at that. In-depth notes about where we want to start from. Okay. All right, let's get started here.
Hopefully we won't be interrupted by sirens this time.
That'd be good. That'd be good. All right, here we go. Okay, so we talked about previously was that the world is made with a balance. And this balance is what is necessary for the Kedusha, the holiness of the world, to keep the lack of Kedusha in check. Meaning there's physicality and there's the mundane, and that's what the world is primarily made of. And that needs to be balanced with the holiness. It needs to be balanced with the Kedusha. And in order for that to happen, Hashem designated a specific percentage of time that the world will be infused with this Kedusha. And that will create the balance that the world needs. So primarily, that's talking about Shabbos, that the proportion of 1 to 6 is the proportion that's necessary to strike that balance. And there are the additional holidays that will accomplish some, although not as much as Shabbos, but they will also add a degree of holiness which will also help with this balance.
I'm sorry, say 1 6?
1 to 6.
1 2 6. Okay.
1 to 6. Yes, I'm keenly aware that there are 7 days in the week. I've been studying a lot.
So the first time you said though, did you say the word 1 6?
It's recorded.
1 to 6.
You can even watch the recording.
No, do you remember?
I do remember. I
Do
said
you
1 to
remember?
6.
You said 1 6.
I said 1 to 6.
Oh, you said 1 to 6 the first
I
time.
did.
It sounded like 1 6.
All right, we're not going to play the age game over here.
Hold
but-
on, let me get my
Yeah, exactly.
fixed.
Okay, but it is recorded, so feel free to check the recording.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so additionally, he also said that this is something that we alone are charged with. It's something that we are able to tap into, and it's not something that the rest of the world is privy to. So it's specifically our ability to connect with this Kedusha, and the rest of the world doesn't have that. He also said that we find the same ratio of 1 to 6 with the world as a whole, meaning that we have the 6,000 years of the world as we know it, and then we have the 7,000, the next 1,000 years, which are providing the holiness, so to speak. And he also said that it goes by the end. The end is what draws everything after it, which I found that to be a new approach, a chiddush, because typically we see things from the beginning being what sets the tone, but here he's saying it's at the end that draws everything after it. So
6 to 1.
So Rabbi, it's like a self-maaseh b'machshavas tefillah, no?
Okay.
is it Sof Mas? I got it. Is it Sof Masa b'machshavas tchila? Well, not exactly. Sof Masa b'machshavas tchila is a concept that everything is designed. There's a sheet up here. That everything is designed from the get-go to complete a plan. That doesn't mean that what happens at the end is what draws everything after it. Typically, we understand that Shabbos is what gives the rest of the week its ability. In other words, Shabbos infuses the coming week with its existence, and certainly with its holiness. But the way he's saying it over here is that Shabbos affects the previous week, and it draws it after, which, again, it's an interesting thing because it's hard to understand how something which has already happened is affected by something that hasn't happened yet. So I'm not exactly sure how he understands this. He doesn't really explain himself. But he
You like
says
repairing it?
repairing it.
Somehow like fixing it, or
It's not really the wording that he used. The wording that he used was. Let's see, what was his wording over here?
Retroactive.
That is very cool. Very cool.
His wording is, "V'inei kivna shesayf hasibuv yetamid b'kodesh." Hashem always arranged it that the end of the cycle should be the holiness. V'nimtza ze ili gadol l'chol hayamim. That makes a great elevation for all of the days. So I'm not sure exactly how that works, but he is saying that the system is such that the end is able to affect what had been done previously, which I'm not sure how that works. But certainly we see that when it comes to the world. The world is 6,000 years followed by a 7,000. Right, the 7,000 years, that last 1,000 is certainly the 1,000 of holiness. The same thing with the creation of the world. 6 days of regular creation, and then the 7th day was Shabbos, right? So there certainly is an aspect that we see that Hashem ends with the holiness, and he's saying that that's to accomplish affecting everything that had been previously. But again, I'm not exactly sure what the parameters of that are, and the mechanics even. I'm not really sure exactly how that works. All right. Okay, so let's continue on here. We're up to Gimel. Top of the page. So Amnam. It's only water. It's only the non-coffee drinkers.
Yeah, what is that anyway? Oh dear.
Kefi hamayla hazais shemasigim Yisrael b'yom zeh. Based on this this high level that Klal Yisrael is able to reach on this day, Kein ra'i sheyeh hanagasam bay. That is the way our activity should be. The way we act should be relative to the holiness that exists on this day. So now he needs to explain this, and he says, "Ulam, hine ha'esek ba'olam kvar be'arnu l'mayla." Yes, you all missed it. Yes, you all missed it. The involvement in this world that we live in, be'arnu l'mayla, we've already explained earlier. Shehu mimashem ekasher adam mechamris. It's the fact that we are connected to physicality. That's it. There's no way around that. We're connected to physicality. Umashpil inyana, and this lowers a person's whole idea. And it brings a person down from the high level and the greatness that he really is fit to have. But our connection to physicality is what stops that. And that is what we need to remove ourselves from. We need to disconnect ourselves from that on Shabbos. Because Shabbos is the time that we can elevate ourselves from that which we are during the week. And we should hold ourselves with the proper in the proper level, the proper atmosphere, the proper attitude that is appropriate for this high level. So, basically, Shabbos is an adjustment. We need to adjust to that adjustment. Right? This adjustment happens in the world. It doesn't happen to us. It happens to the entirety of the universe. We need to then adjust to match that. However, to completely remove ourselves from that, that's impossible. You can't completely remove yourself from physicality. That's death, right? So that's not an option. Because at the end of the day, we're still living in this world, and it's a physical world, and we are bound to that, and therefore we have to stick with that. The kishur hagufani alav, and the connection to our body is there. There's nothing to do about that. But Hashem's divine wisdom measured Hamadrega, the level to which we should detach ourselves from this physicality, and the exact level that we need to stay with the physicality. So Hashem knows that we need to be connected to physicality. We are physical. He also knows that this Shabbos is an opportunity to disconnect from the physicality. So Hashem struck that balance for us and showed us exactly how much to remove ourselves and how much to remain connected. The Hamadrega Shiraish Notek, and the level that we should be disconnecting is Tziv Shiraish Notek. That Hashem commanded us to disconnect. V'izhira Shalayechdal Melinotek, and Hashem warned us against avoiding this disconnection. And this is the basis for all of the malachos, the 39 categories of work that we're not allowed to do on Shabbos. So what he's saying here is that Hashem designed the laws of Shabbos to disconnect us just right from this physical world, and in doing so, we're able to capitalize on the holiness of Shabbos. And once we're able to keep Shabbos, then we're able to make that adjustment to balancing the new spiritual capacity that we have on Shabbos, and that's going to require detaching ourselves from the physicality of the world. So we use the Hashem's guidelines, which we call the malachos, so 39 categories of forbidden activity on Shabbos, and that by sticking to that, we know that we've struck the right balance. So once we do that, everything else will fall into place. So if we can stick to those rules, then we will have detached ourselves sufficiently from this world, but not too much so. And this allows us to connect to the spirituality that the day brings without missing any of that opportunity. Now, he throws in a line over here that Hashem commanded us and warned us against not taking advantage of this. Meaning to say, this isn't just like a nice thing. This isn't just something that you can choose, like, hey, this is here's an opportunity, let me go grab it, but otherwise I can decide I don't want that opportunity. It's not the way it works. Hashem told us that you have to stick to this. And he told us this in the harshest terms. Violating Shabbos carries capital punishment. What's it all about? Well, it's about this. It's that Hashem has put a certain amount of holiness into the world to balance the world, and if somebody is not going to do their part in that, they're throwing off the balance of the entirety of the universe. Right? There's an exact measure here, and everything is precisely calculated. So if somebody's going to just avoid that and say, no thank you, the whole world balance is going to be off. There's a degree of holiness that's not manifesting in the world, and that's a big problem. So Hashem has spoken in the most severe terms, saying that you've got to keep Shabbos. This is really important. The entire universe needs you to keep Shabbos. So don't think that what you do isn't important. Every single one of us, we have this responsibility because that's what the world rests on. You know, the world's teetering. It's got to have this balance, this 1 to 6 balance, and if somebody's not doing their part, it's going to be off.
Cumulatively speaking, aren't there more Jews that don't keep Shabbos than there are Jews that keep Shabbos? So therefore,
cumulatively speaking, yes, there are more Jews who do not keep Shabbos than the ones that do. So has Hashem taken this into account? Right. Yes. Yes, Hashem has taken this into account.
And maybe that's why the world's a little off balance. And that's why there's violence.
We can definitely assume that the lack of our observing mitzvos is contributing to the craziness of the world. Yes, that's for sure. So those of us who are aware and who are capable, how much more so is it incumbent upon each of us? How much more important is it for each of us? I once there was a person who did it was some one of these talent shows, and they made this very artistic balancing act where they balanced all these different things on like one little point, and then they hung this and they hung that, and this very ornate thing, and the weight that was balancing the whole thing was a feather, like a literal feather. and then at the end of the presentation, she removed the feather, and the whole thing collapsed. It's like balance, precision. There's a lot of precision involved in balance, and even removing the feather can literally tip the scales. So we have to be aware of that. We have to make sure that we understand the value of Shabbos and how important it is for us to stick to the laws, because that's what's creating this balance.
Can I just share that there was story after story after story on October 7th of people whose lives were saved because they kept Shabbos?
Absolutely, yes. As Gula was mentioning, October 7th, there was a lot of stories, entire areas that were spared, and individuals who were spared directly on account of their keeping Shabbos. Famously, there were two neighborhoods that were they have these security gates at the front that always open when a car comes, but they turn them off for Shabbos because people shouldn't be driving on Shabbos, so they keep them closed. So the terrorists just couldn't get in, and they just kept going. Right? It wasn't worth trying to break in, so they kept going, and the entire neighborhoods were saved because of that. And many individuals were keeping Shabbos, and therefore they weren't wherever they were going to be. They were somewhere else because they were keeping Shabbos and things like that. And there's numerous stories, and which is why after it happened, many of our sages here in America and in Israel recommend that everybody start studying the laws of Shabbos every day. It's a very important thing to do.
I saw in a bookstore recently a 2,000-page volume that was just stories from October 7th of people's lives were saved on Shabbos.
Wow.
Each story was about 1 to 2 pages.
2,000-page book that was published about stories of people who were saved on October 7th because of Shabbos. All right, very good.
Big words.
What? Big words? All right.
Homework for next week.
It's Hebrew. Hebrew doesn't do big words.
Hebrew, yeah. Unless they're trying to copy it in English, yeah. Okay. All right, good? Moving on? Okay. Dalet. ומלבד מה שנאסר שלא לפגוע מכבוד הקודש, הנשאר בהם זה כמו שזכרנו. In addition to that which we are forbidden from damaging the honor of Shabbos, of this holy day, as we've explained. In addition, we also have to honor this holiness that is coming, the Shefa that is here. This includes delighting in Shabbos, and honoring it, as it comes and as it takes leave, with Kiddush and Havdalah. Ushar kol pratav, as well as all of its other details. Kulam inyanim noisadim b'klalam al yisad hazeh. Everything is based on and revolves around this point that we've mentioned. Shehu lishmar es atzmeinu, and this is to guard ourselves be'erech haroi, in the exact appropriate manner, the kedusha hanishbas lanu, to the holiness that is coming down to us, ulechabed hamayla hazais uliyakra, and to love this high level, to embrace it, to respect it, l'chavod and yana, to honor the whole idea, shehu, which is kurva gedola, a great close connection, elav yisbarach, to Hashem, udevekus gadol bai, and a very strong clinging to Him. Ulechavod naisna yisbarach, and in honor of the one who gave it, who gave us this wonderful gift. And the details of all of these rules, all the things that we're not to do, all the things that we are to do, are directly correlated and connected to this idea, all the different ways, all the different outgrowths and everything, based on what they truly are. So there's so much to Shabbos. It's very easy to just focus on the prohibitions because they're extensive and they're a lot to learn and a lot to know, and they come up all the time, every Shabbos. So you have to be well versed, and it's very easy to get caught up in that. But the Ramchal is saying there's another aspect, and that is the honor, the delight, the focus on what Shabbos is all about. And Shabbos isn't just about what we're not doing. It's not just about disconnecting from the physical. It's about also connecting to the physical in a spiritual way. So Shabbos is a unique time in which we are commanded to enjoy physically. Right? You're supposed to physically enjoy Shabbos. You're supposed to enjoy it as an eineg, as a delight, a physical delight. So you're supposed to eat well, you're supposed to drink well, you're supposed to sleep. These are all things that we do specifically on Shabbos as a mitzvah, right? Which is an interesting concept, because the whole idea is that we're supposed to be detaching ourselves from physicality, but at the same time we're supposed to be, embracing the physicality. So how does it work? The answer is that both are true. We're supposed to distance ourselves from a certain part of physicality, and we're supposed to embrace a different part. And Hashem told us what those parts are. He said, these are the things you need to stay away from. These are the things you want to get involved in. And if you do that, you're striking the balance. Hashem knows the balance, and He's doing it exactly right. You follow along, you'll be doing it exactly right too. So with each of these details, there's a halacha. There's a part of Shabbos that we're supposed to be keeping. So Reb Chaim Friedlander here has he just goes through kind of each line and shows you which halachos he's referring to in the Ramchal. And if I can find it, I'll even read it to you. Second. Let's see. Okay. So he says, let's see. Okay, so he says, we have, first of all, he says, in addition to the prohibitions, we have the eineg, which is the delight, which the Rambam says, Ezo eineg, what's the delight that we have on Shabbos? This is what our sages have taught us. We should prepare a uniquely fat food, which just means a good food. And a spiced drink, meaning a good drink. We have the high quality foods and drinks for Shabbos. And the Rambam writes that eating meat and drinking wine, that is the delight, which is for Hashem on Shabbos. And then he says, and to honor it. What's the honor? So the Rambam says, rechitza is washing yourself, l'kvod Shabbos, in honor of Shabbos. Ksus, and to have clothing that is clean and specifically for Shabbos. Ezu kavod, what is, the Rambam says, what is this honor that we show to Shabbos? That's what our sages tell us. We should wash ourselves in hot water before Shabbos. And we should wrap ourselves in tzitzis, in proper attire. And we should sit with seriousness and prepared to receive Shabbos as it comes, as if we were receiving the king. Part of this honor is to wear clean clothing. Your Shabbos clothing should not be like your weekday clothing. Via ner dolok, and your candles should be lit. Shulchan aruch, your table should be set. Mita mutzas, your bed should be made. Shekol elachod Shabbos, and this is all the way we honor Shabbos. Then he says we honor it as it comes in. What's that? Mesader alu shulchanim b'erev Shabbos. We should set our table from before Shabbos, so that it should be honored when it comes in. And then it would say, as Shabbos leaves, we should also set our table when Shabbos leaves, in order to honor it as it's leaving. So basically what he's saying is that if you go through all the different details of what we're supposed to do on Shabbos, how we're supposed to treat Shabbos, you'll see that they're all codified in law. Right? These are not just concepts. These are the halachos of Shabbos. The do's and don'ts of Shabbos are for this. This is what they're accomplishing. They're here to create that appreciation for the holiness of Shabbos, the value of Shabbos, and by honoring it and involving ourselves in all these different details, going through all these motions, we will have done what's necessary to make that happen. And then the flip side, which was the first part, is avoiding all the things that we shouldn't be doing. That's the malacha, and that's what that accomplishes. Okay, good? All right. Okay. Okay. All right, let's continue on here. Hey. V'amnam. Got the water. Gazra hachachma ha'ayana. Hashem's divine wisdom decreed. Lahaisif liyisrael kiddush al kiddush. To increase for us sanctification upon sanctification. And Hashem gave us other holy days in addition to Shabbos. And on these days we will attain different levels of the levels of holiness. However, they're all beneath the level of Shabbos. So Shabbos is the highest level, it's the most capacity for holiness, the greatest capacity. And every holiday has a lesser degree of holiness that it is able to impart. Hashba'asai v'kiddushay, both in the shefa that comes down to us and in the holiness itself that is present. Never mind. Based on the level of shefa that these days bring, so too do we need to detach ourselves from our involvement in the physical world. And based on that is the prohibition against malacha on these days. And this is Yom Kippur Yom Kippur is the highest of all these levels. Again, it's still below Shabbos, but it's the highest of all of these days, which is why on Yom Kippur we're not allowed to do any malacha. No malacha is allowed on Yom Kippur the same way it's not allowed on Shabbos. However, it's still below Shabbos, and we see this in the fact that the punishment for violating Yom Kippur is lesser than the punishment for violating Shabbos. And after that we have the other holidays. The other holidays, we are allowed to do some work. We're allowed to cook. We're allowed to do anything that's necessary for food preparation. Not anything, but most things that are necessary for food preparation. We're allowed to carry things outside. There is a list of things that are permitted for the Yontif. And that, he says, is because the level of Kedusha that they possess is not as great as the level of Shabbos, and therefore the detachment that we need to have from this world is less. So therefore we're allowed to do certain things that we wouldn't be allowed to do on Shabbos. After that we have the next level, which is Chol Hamoed. And Chol Hamoed has lots of rules. Many people are not familiar with them, and that's a problem. I highly recommend learning those halachas because most people are not aware of a lot of those. But that has less restriction. One second. That has less restriction than the regular Yontif itself. So Chol Hamoed certainly has a lot of restriction, but it's not on the same level at all as the Yontif itself. And that is again because the shefa of Kedusha that is being brought down to Chol Hamoed is less than that of the days of Yontif, and therefore the detachment that we need to have from this world is only to a lesser degree, and that's why there is more permittance for things on Chol Hamoed than there is on the rest of Yontif. Yes, go ahead.
There's a new-ish book out called Guidelines on the Rules of Chol Hamoed. It's a really nice, it's about 40 pages of going through the halachos of Chol Hamoed, very easy to follow in English. I was going to go that I recommend it to people if they wanted.
Okay, all right. There's a book called Guidelines, apparently that goes through the laws of Chol Hamoed succinctly. There's also the classic book, The Laws of Chol Hamoed, which is not as succinct, but is certainly a very good resource. And yes, highly recommend that everybody go through those laws whenever you are able. Okay, then we have Acharei Rosh Chodesh. The next level down we have is Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh, ve'ein ba bittul malacha elo l'nashim. Rosh Chodesh, there is no prohibition against malacha. Nevertheless, for women, they don't do malacha on Chol Hamoed. On Rosh Chodesh. Now this is a minhag, so if it's not your minhag, you don't need to stick to it. And it's also only for specific things, and the minhagim vary from community to community, family to family even, regarding which things are not to be done by women on Rosh Chodesh. But whatever it is, we see that there's a very minimal amount of restriction for Rosh Chodesh because the degree of holiness that it brings is very limited, and therefore the degree of detachment that we need to have from this world is limited as well. V'achar kol zeh Chanukah u'Purim. And after all of that, we have the lowest level is Chanukah and Purim, she'ein behem bittul malacha, that there is no prohibition against doing any kind of malacha, ela hayda b'Chanukah, except that we do say Hallel, we thank Hashem on Chanukah, v'simcha gam kim b'Purim, and then on Purim we add to the giving praises and thanks, we also add the festivities, the happiness, the joy, which is what Purim is all about. So basically what he's saying is that we have all of these days and we see that the laws that connect to them are directly corresponding to the degree of detachment that we need to have based on the degree of holiness that they bring. So the more holiness, the more detachment we need to have, and therefore the more restrictions there are. And this is the level. It goes Shabbos, followed by Yom Kippur, followed by Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, followed by Chol Hamoed, followed by Rosh Chodesh, and then finally followed by Purim and Chanukah. Okay? Now, B'kol zeh kifi erech hashef hanishva v'or hamer hahu. All of this is directly connected and related to the shefa that comes down and the light that shines on these days. Okay.
The more you put in, the more you get out.
The more you put in, the more you get out. Yes, not exactly what we're saying here, but yes.
That's not what that last line is saying?
No, what he's saying is that the more restrictions that we have is because the more holiness that's coming in, the more we need to detach ourselves from this world, and the restrictions are designed to do that for us. So Shabbos, which has the greatest level of holiness, has the greatest degree of restrictions, because the holiness necessitates that we detach from
More than
the
Hashem
physical.
put it in.
The more holiness that's coming, the more we need to remove ourselves from the physical. So when you said the more you get in, the more you take out, I don't think you meant. What you could have said was the more that gets put in, the more we need to take ourselves out of the physical. That's probably what you meant. But I'll check with you later.
You have to observe the different parameters. There's different parameters. You have different levels.
Right.
Observe each one in its own.
Correct. Each one is designed based on this degree of detachment from the world that we need to have. Okay. Should we keep going here? Finish up?
Yeah.
All right, let's finish up. You going to stay with us?
Are we still awake?
No. Perfect. Sleep well. Vulam. Milvad HaKiddush Hazeh. In addition to this sanctification, this holiness, Hanishar b'madrigat k'fi madrigat Kedushas Yamim, based on what is been measured to the different levels based on the holiness of each of these days that we've mentioned. Yesh Eid in Yonim Pratiyim Miyuchadim. There are also specific things, specific ideas that are unique. L'chol zman mezmanim ela, for each of these times, k'fi in Yonim, based on its idea. V'shayrash kulam. I mean, just an idea, right? Like, for example, there is matzah on Pesach, right? And there's a shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And there's a lulav and a sukkah on Sukkot, right? So there are specific things that are connected to each of these days. And the shayrash kulam, and the root of each of these, is Seder Shesidra Chachma Yana, is the order that Hashem's divine wisdom has ordered. So called Tikkun Sheniskan, that every correction that's going to be corrected. V'ar Gadol Sheheir B'zmamei Azmanav, and the great light that will shine during each of these times. B'shuv Tekuvas Azmanahu, when that time comes back around again in the cycle of the year, Ya'ir Aleinu Ar Me'ena Ar Rishon. So that light will, not exactly the same light, but a light that is similar to that original light will come back. So the light that happened, that came into the world on the first Pesach, continues to come, a similar light to it, every year on Pesach. So the same way the ideas that took place in the world on the first Pesach necessitated the mitzvah of matzah, so too every year when that cycle comes back around and that day in the calendar comes back, that same light, that same shefa, at least a degree of it, comes back, and therefore we have that mitzvah again. So the same way on the first Rosh Hashanah we blew shofar, because of all of what the day brought at that initial moment, so that cycles and comes back around every year, and that's why we have the same mitzvahs every year. And there is a correction that takes place, that is renewed with the person who accepts it. So, what he's saying here is that there's a cycle, which you mentioned in the past, that the world works in an annual cycle, and the shefa that came at a particular point in that cycle returns again. It comes back every year at that time. And therefore, whatever the shefa and the corrections and whatever was going on at that moment comes back again the next year, and the next year, and the next year, till today. And therefore, when Shabbos is here, the same things that were going on up there in all the celestial worlds is happening again. And the same thing every Pesach, and the same thing every Sukkot, and every Rosh Chodesh, and every Chanukah and Purim, etc. So those things are constantly coming back, and that's why we have the same restrictions, and we have the same opportunities, and the same mitzvahs every year. Yeah.
So when I first learned that concept, it was easiest for me to think of it as an explosion in time, of like with Pesach, it was an explosion of freedom. And we commemorate it through those symbols. When you think of it every year as an explosion of freedom, then it just sort of makes sense.
Okay. Okay. So therefore, v'hine al pi zeh, so based on this, since stavinu b'chag Pesach, b'chol yonash stavinu. So therefore, we are commanded on Pesach with all the things that we are commanded, as a remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. Because that rectification that took place at that time was so great, as mentioned earlier, it was established that when this time comes back around, that a light that is similar to that light will come back and it will shine again. And it can be renewed within us, that accomplishment that was accomplished then, again now. And that's why we are required to do all of those things again every year. The same way when it comes to Shavuos, as far as our the giving of the Torah, as well as Sukkot for the clouds of glory. Even though when it comes to Sukkot, it's not about a specific moment. Just the Torah made this holiday of Sukkot to commemorate the clouds of glory, which lasted our entire journey through the desert. So it was all the time, but our sages established, or the Torah established, a specific time to commemorate that. As the Torah says, that on Sukkot I had you dwelling in the clouds of glory. So we see that Hashem designated a time, meaning that this time would be the time that would be the shefa that's going to come about this idea is going to come at this time of year, even though that wasn't about a specific time of year. Now, he just brings here in the bottom of mine that the Vilna Gaon mentions that the reason it's specifically then is because this is the day, the 15th of Tishrei, which is when we have Sukkot, is the day that they began the construction of the Mishkan. And the Mishkan was what housed the Shekhinah. So the beginning of the process of bringing the Shekhinah down to the world to give it a place began on Sukkot, and that's why it's that specific time that we commemorate the clouds of glory, which was a manifestation of the Shekhinah. V'chein Chanukah, v'chein Purim, that's the same way for Chanukah and Purim. V'al Derech Zal, you call Yemei Megillas Tainis, and all the days that were in something called Megillas Tainis, which was a list of different holidays and fast days and things. Elish and Hizbatu, but those have been abolished. We don't keep all those anymore. We just keep the ones that are the established ones. They were too much for everybody to stick to, and therefore they were abolished. And we were exempt from commemorating all of those days. In order to bring down the light of those days. So we're not going to talk about those. Those aren't in practice anymore. But the ones that we do have, we certainly now have a better understanding. And he says, and now we will go into the different mitzvahs that we have for each of those holidays and exactly how they are connected. And that, I believe, is the last chapter. Yeah. Almost, not quite.
Are we going to have a siyum?
Are we going to have a siyum? I say start planning. Alrighty. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.
I think the siyum should be an Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's do a siyum in Eretz Yisrael. All right.
You're going to find Kol Yisrael.
Yeah, sign me up.